Like Rumi says that before you were born, God drew a circle on a map exactly where your feet should stand. And that is exactly how I feel about most of my life, all of my life, but also my yoga teaching career.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I hope you're doing great as you're listening and tuning into this week's podcast episode. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I'm so happy that you have found this podcast. And if you're a returning listener, I'm very grateful that you are here again tuning in to this week's episode. The Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast was started about a year ago because I wanted to share the journey of full-time yoga teachers across the world to highlight their passion of why they do what they do, as well as sharing the challenges that they have overcome, and so that they can share their tips and tricks that they learned along the way to be a successful full-time yoga teacher. This is a podcast I wish I had when I was a newer teacher trying to navigate the world of full-time yoga teaching. So I hope this conversations I have with other full-time yoga teachers from around the globe can inspire you, give you ideas, and maybe motivation to keep going. I do interview part-time teachers as well because I want to highlight different paths and unique path that each and every one of us take to do what we love, which is yoga. So I hope you're enjoying all the conversations that I've been having on this podcast. A little bit of, update and announcement before we get started on today's episode. First update, I just finished teaching the first weekend of SmartFlow 200-hour teacher training in Laguna Niguel, Orange County, at a yoga studio called Live Meta. That's the studio I teach classes twice a week, and I was a little bit nervous and super excited to start this SmartFlow yoga teacher training, and we have the most amazing, wonderful group of students for this teacher training, and I am so excited for the remaining 7 more weekends to come. And if you have been a long-time listener, you know that last year this time I was assisting my teacher, Annie Carpenter, in her 200-hour SmartFlow yoga teacher training in Oakland. And I have shared my weekly experiences on this podcast every time I went to Oakland to assist. And I just feel like it's slightly deja vu that it was around the same time last year, and now I am teaching my own. It's not my own because I am co-leading it with another amazing teacher named Shanti, but we are leading SmartFlow together here in Live Meta. And I just been looking back at all of my detailed notes that I took last year, which has been helping me with leading this training this year. And I just feel very grateful that I get to share SmartFlow in 200-hour teacher training format, and what a gift, and how amazing and how wonderful that I get to do this as my job. So I will again keep you all updated, my listeners, every week or every 2 weeks that we have this teacher training. The teacher training is every other weekend format. So we just had our first weekend, we'll have another weekend off, and we'll go back at it in the following weekend. So I'll give all of you an update every time. If you like listening to my update, I feel like I was tapping into my inner Annie Carpenter as I was teaching her movement principle classes this past weekend, and it felt surreal and also wonderful and just grateful. I would say very, very grateful. So one announcement I do want to make before we start today's episode is that I have an amazing workshop coming up. So my great friend Ali Galasso and I have interviewed her last year in the very, very beginning of this podcast journey. So Ali is going to be teaching advanced handstand course for yoga teachers coming up in March. This workshop is part of my mentorship program that I host, and I bring in guest teachers about once a month. So for March, I have Ali as a guest teacher teaching this advanced handstand course for yoga teachers. And this is a special treat because it is in-person workshop and online hybrid workshop. So it's going to be happening in person in Long Beach, where she's going to be teaching in-person workshop how to handstand, not only learning how to handstand, but learning how to teach handstand, because this is catered to yoga teachers. So this workshop is designed for yoga teachers and also passionate practitioners who's eager to teach and practice inversions with confidence. So in this session, you're going to learn effective cues, adjustments, and teaching tips, along with strategies to help your students overcome fear and build the strength needed to go upside down. You'll also deepen your own handstand practice, refining your alignment and technique. You'll leave the workshop with valuable insights, both educational and personal. And you're going to feel more equipped to teach handstand with clarity, while also deepening your own practice from the inside out. And I cannot wait for this workshop because Ali has actually, she was kind enough to offer me private one-on-one handstand session to me last year, because I was telling her that I have extremely tight shoulders, and no matter what I do, I feel like I hit a wall in my handstand practice because I cannot get out of banana back every time I go upside down, and I feel like I always need a wall. So she gave me a private one-on-one session, and she gave me a lot of great tips, and she has so many great tips and tricks and fun little exercises that's going to help you become a better handstander in her back pockets. She has so many, so I'm sure she's going to be sharing a lot of those in this workshop. So if you are not part of my mentorship program but still want to come to this workshop, I am going to invite you to come sign up. It's happening March 1st. That's Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, in person in Long Beach. But like I said, it's going to be hybrid, so you can join via Zoom as well, live, and she can still give you personal feedback and you can still ask her questions. Or if you cannot make it this time, you are welcome to watch the recording. So this workshop is $44 per person, catered to yoga teachers, but also open to passionate practitioners as well. So I'll put the link to this workshop on the show notes. So if you are working on handstand, you're trying to refine your handstand, or maybe you want to become a better teacher for your students who's learning how to handstand, this workshop is going to be amazing. So I highly recommend. So that's March 1st, Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. All right, that's enough announcement for today. So today I interviewed Madison, and Madison holds a lot of important role in the yoga world. She works at Raw Yoga, which is a yoga studio located in Southern California. She not only teaches yoga there, but she manages teachers, teacher training. She teaches many of the advanced teacher training courses and modules on philosophies and Yoga Sutras, meditations. She have amazing upcoming meditation teacher training and also retreats. She teaches many workshops at Raw. She also does hiring, and she just does so much in the yoga world. So I was very excited to have this conversation with her, to kind of ask her about her journey of how she got to where she is now in her teaching career. And we had a lot of great conversation. So I hope you enjoy this interview I had with Madison. I'm going to be linking all of her contact information and how to reach out to her on the show notes. So feel free to look that up and reach out to her if you want to ask any more questions. Otherwise, let's get started on today's interview. I'll speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Madison, for coming to join me on the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm very excited that I get to have this conversation with you. I've spoken and interviewed several people on this podcast that always talked very highly of you. So I'm so
Oh,
happy that we finally get to have this chat. Definitely Rick comes to mind when I'm saying
mm.
he talks very, very highly of you. So anyway, how are you doing, Madison?
Oh, I am doing really well. I just got done last night hosting the winter solstice party for the 300-hour teacher training at Raw. And that's something just kind of turned into its own little tradition. It's been the third year where I just get together all students, current and graduated, and we just get to focus on being social and hanging out and being cozy and do a little present swap and all those fun things. So my heart is very full right now.
Oh, that sounds so nice.
Yeah.
And tell the listener, where are you logging in from?
I am located in Irvine, California.
And is that where you're from?
It is actually. My 16-year-old self would be very angry to say that I live 10 minutes from where I was born. I live 7 minutes from where my mom lives, which is where I've spent most of my life in Irvine. So I've tried to move away a couple times and it's never quite worked out. So here I am.
I feel like I also felt like I wanted to leave, get out when I was younger, but there's something to like make a full circle back. And it's like, actually, this is a really good place I grew up. Like, I actually have a whole new appreciation for places that when I was younger, I just couldn't wait to get out, you know?
Yeah, it's a Mexican proverb. They say it is a blessing to be born and die in the same home. And that really like hits my heart because there is something very beautiful about allowing things to build and evolve over time and seeing yourself reflected back to you as your surroundings stay the same. You're almost even more keenly aware of how you change. So that's, I think just like everything, it's perspective.
Yeah.
And so having that proverb has really helped me change my perspective on how it can actually be a really beautiful thing that I get to live my life here, especially because, it's a gorgeous place to live, full of so many opportunities. Like, it's not really something to complain about.
Yeah, I love that proverb. I think I got a little bit of goosebump when you share that. So that's so beautiful. So maybe
Mhm.
tell the listeners. I feel like I know you, but I don't know you in details and like how you got to where you are now. So
Mhm.
can you tell the listener how did you first get introduced to yoga?
So I very first got introduced to yoga at a Total Women's Gym, which is like, I don't think it's even around anymore. But my mom, when I was, gosh, probably between the ages of like 12 and 14, my mom went to that gym and took yoga classes and took me with her. So that's when I can first remember doing yoga. But then I really got into it after being injured. So I was a ballerina for most of my life and really severely injured my body, my right lower back specifically, my SI joint, and my piriformis and sciatic nerve on the right side. And so it ended my dancing career. And through yoga, I was able to come back into movement and come back away from injury. It still acts up sometimes, but if I keep my body moving and moving mindfully, then I like live a life without pain, thanks to yoga.
Wow, I had no idea
Yeah.
you were a ballet dancer. And when you first started practicing yoga after the injury, was it quite apparent right away that like, wow, this practice is like really helping me, maybe either not only physically, but maybe mentally, emotionally, or did it take a while to realize like I guess the power of yoga?
Well, it's really funny because I was going to a studio that is to not do shots fired, we'll just say a big name studio that is very focused on the workout aspect and they teach a set sequence. And so I was going in with an injury and the injury was not being acknowledged or in any way, like I was given no tools around, oh, you have an injury. Maybe this sequence doesn't work for you. Here's a possibility. Here's an opportunity to modify anything like that. But what was really cool about that is that then I got to figure out how to modify and I got to figure out how to move my body and I got to figure out, okay, well, I want to keep doing this. Like, what am I going to do to make this work? And it was actually very empowering. And it really did remind me, I think I've always known the power of movement. So I did ballet, and then I was a sign language interpreter, and then I was a dance teacher. And so I've always, always, always known the healing power of movement. And when I first started doing yoga movement, yoga asana, I just saw it as another healing movement. I didn't quite click into the spiritual side of it until I did my teacher training and I started kind of walking down that path.
That brings me to the next question of like, when did you first feel like you wanted to become a yoga teacher?
My first day of my 200-hour teacher training, I had never, ever, ever, ever thought about it. I had been taking classes for a while, but it never crossed my mind. And my teacher, Jill, love her to pieces, Jill Grog. She's like, in my mind, a legend in Orange County fitness. She was my teacher and she was leading the next 200-hour teacher training. And so she was like checking me in for class and she went, "Oh, you should do a 200-hour teacher training. I'm leading it. It starts next month." And I was like, okay. That was about the thought I put into it. It's like, sure, whatever. That sounds fun. I had a little bit of time and a little bit of money at the time. So I was just like, why not? And then the first day of our 200-hour, they do this thing where they popcorn teach. It's like surprise popcorn teaching. And so I walked in and they gave everyone in the room like their 5 minutes to like popcorn teach. And I was given sun A. And I'm like, inhale, arms up, exhale, back bend, inhale, arms rise. And just like as I went inhale, arms rise, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is it now. It just like immediately settled into my bones. And I was just like, this is the next thing.
Wow, that's amazing. And what kind of teacher training was it? Was it a vinyasa? It was like, format? Was it intensive versus over the span of several months?
Yeah, it was a 200-hour teacher training at Core Power. At the time, it took, I believe, 7 weeks, and it was like every weekend, and then like one Tuesday night a week, something like that. It was like every Saturday, and then like one Tuesday night a week. And I think it only took about 7 weeks. And I was already teaching before the teacher training was done.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's amazing.
yeah, by
And-
like week 3, I was already subbing.
oh, really? What?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. And I guess I'm curious about what were you doing before or during your teacher training? What was your job before?
Well, during teacher training, I sold goat cheese and and also owned a cupcake company called Canary's Cupcakes, which specialized in vegan and gluten-free baked goods.
Uh-huh.
So I was doing that. And before that, honestly, I was on unemployment. That's why I had a little bit of time, a little bit of money, is I was on unemployment and really just kind of lost and looking for what it was I was going to do next. I had drifted around in my early 20s. I started working very early. I finished my education very young. I started working very young. And corporate America was not healthy for me. It was not good for me. And so that was the only thing that I'd really had known as a possibility of a career. And so by the time I was on unemployment and 25 and looking at going to teacher training, I just thought that I was always going to be a wandering misfit in this world. And I thought maybe I would just have to be a bartender for the rest of my life, because it was either corporate America, like vice president of marketing, or it was a bartender and a lost soul. Not that all bartenders are lost souls, but that was like the bifurcation in my mind of possibilities.
I had no idea you owned a cupcake store. That's some gluten-free and vegan cupcakes. But that maybe we'll circle back to this later. But I wonder, you having experience of owning a business have helped you later in your yoga teaching career. But maybe we can circle back to that. So I want to talk about how you started teaching even during the teacher training. So once you were in the teacher training, you started subbing already. And teacher training finishes, I'm assuming you started teaching right away. Did you kind of like go straight into teaching full time? Were you teaching a lot right away, or was there like a slow transition between your life before and then your life as a full-time teacher?
Yeah, I had already taught dance before in my life, so I'd already taught movement. And one of the women at my mom's church opened a gym and needed a hip hop teacher. So I went in and like started teaching hip hop for her. And that was as I was starting my training. So I told her, I was like, oh, I'm doing my 200-hour yoga teacher training. And she was like, oh, you got a yoga class on the schedule. You want to start next week, Saturday, Tuesday? What do you want to do? And she just like threw me right into it. So I was teaching hip hop and yoga for her like right away. And then also at Core Power, during training, teachers wouldn't show up for class. I think it happened like twice. It's not like it happened all the time or anything, but a teacher would not show up for class. And so I just started jumping in and subbing even at Core Power. That is one thing I would say was really nice about Core Power's training is that they give you the C1 sequence. And so I was able like right away to be like, this is how an hour long yoga class, here you go. And I just rode that C1 sequence for a couple of months, which really kind of helped me get my grounding. And then once I graduated, actually the night of my graduation, I went out with some of the teachers to the ranch in Anaheim and met a guy there that I fell head over heels in love with. And so the night of my graduation, when I should have been starting my career in Orange County, I was falling in love with a guy in Long Beach. So then I ended up moving to Long Beach. And in Long Beach, I taught at two different dance studios and two different yoga studios. And I did that for like the first like 6, 8 months before that relationship crashed and burned. I came back to Orange County, and that's when I auditioned at Raw.
Wow. So you were teaching right away, even during the training, and then right after you were teaching already quite a bit. Was it, I guess I'm curious to know what was it like being a new teacher, teaching many classes, and I don't know if you had another job during that time that was supplementing teaching income, or were you able to make it work as just teaching yoga for your income?
Yeah, I mean, one piece of advice I have for anyone going through their 200-hour teacher training who wants to be a yoga teacher, and honestly, any training for any career that they want to pursue, I think it is so important to get yourself doing that as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the bigger it becomes in your mind. It becomes this like insurmountable goal of this big thing that you want to do one day. And it's like, just do the thing. Just start doing it. And it seems so much smaller than it ever will at the beginning. So I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to just start teaching. Otherwise, I could totally have seen myself being someone that graduated and then thought about being a yoga teacher for a long time. So I was supplementing with teaching dance. So I taught dance and I taught yoga, but everything that I was doing for a living was all movement. So I was either teaching dance or yoga. I was teaching, like I said, two different dance studios and two different yoga locations in Long Beach.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's so much easier and better to just start teaching right away after 200. The longer you wait, it gets more and more challenging to back
Mhm.
up, or you feel like you're not ready anymore. You feel like you're starting to forget the things you learned, and it's just better to just go right in. Even if it's just like one class a week, or maybe you're just teaching a donation-based class or teaching to your friends and
Mhm.
family at the park or beach. I think it's important to start right away. I agree with you. So then you said you auditioned for Raw once you moved back to Orange County. So I'm assuming that's when you started teaching for Raw as well as maybe other studios in Orange County.
Yeah. So I moved back and I always knew I wanted to teach at Raw. Raw in my mind was like the gold standard of yoga. I actually graduated from my 200-hour the same month that Raw Yoga opened. So I remember going and taking, I believe it was Sarah Taggy's class, was the very first class that I took. It was her Tuesday night, 6 o'clock Vinyasa 2 class. I took it like right when I graduated from teacher training. And I just remember walking into that studio and being like, oh, wow. And then, of course, Sarah is just like this exquisitely beautiful, articulate teacher. And so I took her class, and then Thursday night I took Jenny's class. And it just so deeply in my mind was like, wow, this is where the like amazing teachers teach. They're like doing something different here, and it's cool. Well, then I moved, and I just kind of like all year had this thing in my head of like, wow, that raw yoga really is doing something. So I came back down, and the first thing I did was actually audition at 24-Hour Fitness because I knew that I just needed to like pick up a bunch of classes. And I think I taught for maybe like a month or two at 24-Hour Fitness. And then I applied at Raw. I applied at Raw, Sunspark Yoga, the yoga mat, um, and a 24-Hour Fitness. So once I really got the ball rolling, I was teaching 25 classes a week at 6 different gym locations and 5 different yoga studios. Plus, I had private clients. I was exhausted.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Definitely. I can also really relate. I also started teaching so many classes right away. And at the time, I had to make enough money to live. But also, like I think the positive side of that was because I taught so many classes right away as a new teacher, not only in studios, I was teaching at gyms, gold gyms and different, boutiques, gyms and spin studios. I was teaching so many different non-yoga studio spaces as well. But I think I improved as a teacher really fast the first couple of years because I taught so many classes every single week,
Mhm.
every single month. And I know it's something when I look back, I'm glad I did it. I don't know if I can do that again. But I'm glad the way it happened, like I did grow really fast as a teacher. So thank you for sharing that you were teaching so many classes at so many locations. And how long did that last until maybe the next phase of your teaching, I guess, life, like teaching career formed?
I teached at that level, or that I should say, quantity for about like 2.5, 3 years. I mean, it's important to note that even with teaching that much, I still was not making enough to pay rent in Orange County. I was getting paid at 24-Hour Fitness, I was getting paid 19.50 a class. And at most other studios, I was getting paid 25 to 35 a class. And as an independent contractor, you get taxed at 25%. And then obviously you have your car and your gas and all the things. So I was still living at home with my mom, very privileged to say I had the ability to have a free place to live while I was like on that hustle to make that work. So about 2.5, 3 years. And when I look back at photos of me of that time, I was probably some of the unhealthiest I've ever been. Ironically, I was very overweight and I did not look good. And I truly now looking back can see that my body probably extreme adrenal fatigue. My body was in fight or flight. My cortisol levels were through the roof. I was not sleeping. I was not eating properly because you're so all over the place that my body just like started shutting down. And my body's kind of always been my body knows things before I do. I think all of our bodies know things before we do, but my body makes things very clear. And at about that 2.5, 3 year mark, my body was like, you can't keep doing this to me. Like, this is not working. And I am so grateful. I mean, when I look back over my path of teaching, it is truly like Rumi says that before you were born, God drew a circle on a map exactly where your feet should stand. And that is exactly how I feel about most of my life, all of my life, but also my yoga teaching career. Because at about that point where I was really starting to burn out, I had, I was at Raw. I was teaching more classes at Raw. I was starting to drop other classes in order to teach more at Raw. I was starting to leave other studios to accommodate Raw. And Raw had just started its 200-hour teacher training. And so Jenny asked me if I would like to assist her. And that just like completely changed the trajectory of my life. I still remember sitting in the lobby at Costa Mesa and her being like, I'm going to do a 200-hour. Do you want to just like come hang out with me for a couple of weeks and like see how it goes? Like, sure, why not? Okay. And it caused me not only to have to get classes covered, which was actually, at the time seemed like this huge hardship because of finances, but looking back, it was actually what I needed. I needed to give myself days off. I needed to give myself time and space. And then also getting into the trainings reinvigorated my practice because I got so deeply inspired by being in a training program. And like, as I said, I think Core Power's training program really served me in a lot of ways. I'm grateful that I did it. And the way Raw Yoga leads its 200-hour is unparalleled and brought so much joy and richness to not only my teaching, but also to my life. And so right there at that burnout point, where honestly, I look back and think like, maybe I would have kept teaching until I literally was like hospitalized. Like I probably would have just had to like be in the hospital for a couple of days. Right at that point, I was given this like beautiful umph of like hope and opportunity to change how I viewed myself, how I viewed my teaching, and what was possible as a yoga teacher. So I'm so grateful for that.
Wow. So you've been working many classes kind of to the point of burnout for several years. And then, but you were starting to wanted to invest more time and energy into one particular studio, Raw, more than other locations.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when Jenny asked if you like to support her in a
Yeah.
200-hour teacher training. So with the first teacher training that you were part of, what was your role? Were you more like observing and learning, or did you have like a teaching role in that you were also getting paid?
So for my first 200-hour, I was Jenny's assistant, and it is an unpaid position. So it was a mentorship program, is really how I looked at it. I don't think we had it that formally outlined at the time, but I had already asked Jenny to be my mentor, probably about a year before that, and would meet with her on kind of a more casual basis. And then for the 200-hour, the way I viewed it was, wow, I'm going to get 200 hours sitting at the feet of my teacher, of my mentor, of this woman that I revere and respect so deeply. Like everything that she had said and everything that she had taught me and just everything that she was so deeply meaningful to me that I was grateful for the opportunity to be there. And so I think the first 200 hours, I was just an assistant, which looked like helping her set up, helping her clean up, helping her, just like logistics wise, but then getting to sit in every single class and listen and learn for free. I can remember asking a couple really what I now would consider like, right, quote unquote, stupid and like embarrassing questions. But I also think that that was kind of a way that I assisted in the training, is that I always want to understand. And if I don't understand, I'm not afraid to ask. And it would like kind of inspire more conversations and it would inspire more community. And so I think that's kind of what I brought to those first couple trainings, is like that deep, inquisitive, caring nature and the real deep appreciation for the knowledge that I was getting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I also have assisted my teachers, Annie Carpenter's 200-hour teacher training earlier this year, and I also didn't get paid for that, but I knew it was like super beneficial for me to learn under my teacher's, guidance and presence, just be there, be fly on the wall and learn, but also, be there to assist in any way possible. But and I knew there was a strong knowing for me that this is going to lead me to the next step. Like, not that was my like intention. I just wanted to be there to learn from her and just be there to observe. But I also knew that this was like a worthwhile investment, even if I was not getting paid to do it, even if I had to like fly back and forth between Oakland and Long Beach. I knew it was a well worth investment. I knew this is going to make me a better teacher, maybe possibly open up doors for me. So definitely, I understand that. And I really loved what you said, that Jenny was your mentor even before that. And you had this kind of informal mentorship relationship already because you really looked up to her. I just wanted to talk a little bit or ask you a little bit of questions about that, because I really do see the value in having a mentor or somebody you look up to that you can ask questions or learn from as a yoga teacher. that's also sometimes hard to find. I think this
Mhm.
mentor teacher relationship maybe was stronger in the days, maybe a couple generations ago in the yoga world, where we always had teacher we were learning from, and we would assist their classes, assist their trainings, and kind of slowly move up. And that kind of mentorship to teacher to student role is not as present anymore from what I'm seeing. So I love that you had Jenny as a mentor. And how did you like approach her to be your mentor? And how did you know that you wanted her to be your mentor? And what was that relationship like?
Yeah, I would take her class a bunch. And then when I auditioned for Raw, I actually auditioned with the original three owners and the studio owner. So it was Eileen, Bobby, Jenny, and Amanda. My memory of Jenny was that she was not impressed with me and my teaching. We sat in the office and I can remember getting some pretty pointed feedback. Um, but for me as a human, that felt like comfort and that felt like love. Like I receive truth and I receive like honesty as like I am committed to you as a person. Like I care about you so much that I'm not going to sit here and be like, that was so great. Thank you so much. See you next week. Like I care about you enough that I'm going to be like, hey, this isn't working. Do you want to talk about it? Like that to me is the most loving and generous thing that you can do for another human being, especially if you are someone that is would be like further down in a career or further down a path than the person that you're speaking to. So I just remember being so in awe because as much as maybe the conversation wasn't quote unquote easy, right? It wasn't like the nicest, but I left feeling so enriched and so invested in and so cared about. And like she is so careful with her words and so thoughtful with how she communicates that I was just like, what just happened? Like, what is that? I had never experienced that before. And so I just knew that I wanted more of whatever that was. I'm like, I want to be more like that. I want to feel more like that. I want to understand that. So I kept taking her classes. And then I, again, sitting in the lobby at Costa Mesa, just asked her as we were seated there, I was like, would you ever consider being my mentor? And I remember because she looked at me and said, so what does that mean? What does that look like? And which now I know is like a Jenny classic. And yeah, I just said, I want someone to give me advice. I want someone to give me feedback. I just want someone that, has what I want to tell me more about how to get it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. I think it's so important to have, for me, like have a teacher that I look up to that is walking the path that I want to walk, or, doing something similar that I want to be doing. They have this energy that I want to also have. And also being a full-time teacher, it's not an easy path, and
Mm-mm.
there aren't a lot of people doing it. So to be able to find somebody who's already walked the path, I don't have to have exactly the same career and teaching that they have, but to see somebody who have done it already, who's already in the place that I'm not there yet, but I want to get there, and have that person to, be able to ask questions to or get advice from is huge. I think it's so huge. So I love that you asked her to be your mentor, and that was a relationship that you two had. So love that. And
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on, if you don't mind. So I also had another mentor, Colleen Heber. She was a teacher at Raw who I just adored, and she still adore. And she had a more formal mentorship program. So she had a more like, pay per hour mentorship program. My time with Jenny was much more informal, but she was also my boss, right? So that was kind of a little more appropriate that she interacted with me in a different capacity. And I want to agree with you, Rieka. This I just led the Divine Feminine in the 300 hour at Raw. And as part of the Divine Feminine, one of their homework for that course was to find a mentor. And so many of the women in that course, I had about 15 women, and they all came back to me and said, I never even thought about finding a mentor. And we think about finding peers, we think about finding friends. And of course, peers and friends are very important. We should all do that. But if you're just hanging out with people that are kind of who you are, doing kind of what you do, you'll kind of keep doing that. And beyond a yoga capacity, I believe that we as women, and I also believe men as men and everything in between, should find someone that has what you got. They say this in AA, find someone that has what you got and ask them how they got there. It's like a lost art, and it is so sacred to me to have Colleen and Jenny be about 7 years ahead of me in career, in life, in relationships, as women, as humans, as teachers, as entrepreneurs, to have them and have access to them so I could go to them and be like, I want to try this thing. What do you think over here? This relationship isn't working. This guy said this. I'm trying. Like, I would go to them with everything, and the amount of comfort that I would receive hearing sometimes their feedback, sometimes this their support, sometimes their questions, like whatever that is. But the amount of comfort that I would receive in that is invaluable. Like, my life now is so beautiful. I daily get brought to tears by how gorgeous my life is. And I believe with my whole soul that it is that way because I found these two women that inspire me. And I just listened and followed and listened and followed. I think that if I was just out here thinking that I was the smartest human alive and I knew the way how to be a teacher and I knew the way how to be a woman, my life would probably still be a mess because it was when I found them. So I just really, really say, find a mentor. I know, Rieka, you have a mentorship program. You are such a deeply intelligent woman and teacher. Like, I believe anyone would benefit from studying with you. If anyone listening wants to like study with me, I also have a mentorship program, and it can be formal, it can be informal, right? Some of my mentees I go to coffee with once a month and take their class once in a while. Some of my mentees I meet with every week. And, it's like it can evolve in between teacher and student. But the sutras tell us that we need two types of teachers. We need a guru. So we need the enlightened one that we will probably never meet, that we follow because they are so enlightened that their teachings bring us enlightenment. But we also need an acharya. And an acharya, my teacher Robert says, an acharya is someone other than you to tell you you have spinach on your teeth. That's it. Like, you just need someone other than you to be like, hey, this isn't working. So the sutras tell us that we have to have both. Mm-hmm. And my other teacher, John, he says, if you are a student, but not a teacher, you are a thief. But if you are a teacher and not a student, you are a liar. And I take that very seriously. If I am a teacher, but I am not learning, then I am lying. Like, if I am not enriched in these practices, if I'm not bringing these teachings into my day-to-day, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour life, then I'm actually not in alignment and not in integrity. And one way that we do that is we have a teacher that we meet with and we talk to regularly about everything. So I feel so strongly about it. And I just really think that anyone listening should get themselves a mentor. Mm-hmm. It's so important.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I completely agree with you. And that's, that's the one of the reason or biggest reason why I started my mentorship program, as well as this podcast as well, because I would have benefited so much, especially in my beginning stage of teaching career, if I had a mentor. And it was hard to find at the time. I do feel like I have a mentor now, very important teachers in my life, but I feel like I really needed somebody in the beginning and I wanted to offer that. But also this podcast is the same, similarly, like I want to highlight teachers who's been teaching for a really long time, who's already, doing all these things, whether it's a training retreat or have their own business or doing a teacher trainings, and hopefully listeners can see that, listen to that and see like, oh, wow, they have what I want. And it makes it like reality that like, okay, I can get there too. And also like, it also gives a platform for teachers that people listening can now contact people I interviewed. I always put the contact information there. So if they are resonating with somebody, they want to have a chat or coffee with them to figure out how you got to where you are in your life, they can do that. So anyway, I really agree with you, and hopefully students meeting somebody like you or listening to this podcast can also use these tools and resources out there to find somebody and really get inspired by. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. That's so
of
important. And I really
course.
agree with that. Okay, so I guess what happened after that? You were involved in teacher training, you assisted two teacher trainings, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I started assisting. From assisting, I started teaching in the teacher trainings. I was lucky enough to be introduced to Kelsey Delaney. Shout out another mentor, love her dearly. Kelsey Delaney was my first sutras teacher. And I got so inspired by her and by her sutras teaching that I went back to Jenny and was like, I'm loving the sutras. The sutras are such a beautiful thing. And Jenny's like, oh, you want to teach them in the 200 hour? So then I started teaching sutras in the 200 hour. And also that around that same time, they created a position at Raw called a tribal leader. So I was tribal leader for the dynamic arts. I got to work alongside Natalie Bailey, another gorgeous, beautiful woman who I look up to so deeply. Natalie Bailey was for healing arts, and then Hallie Carone, another amazing teacher and another amazing human that I got to work next to. And we were tribal leaders, which meant that we were in leadership. Over is not the right word, not over, but like in leadership of and with the teachers at Raw. At the time, we only had, this was when Costa Mesa was open and Newport was just opening. And so it was a much smaller community. And we were there to develop and create community for the teachers. So from tribal leader, I then started leading more in the 200 hour. And then I believe tribal leader kind of dissolved and turned into the position that I have now, which we call master teacher. A very similar idea. I get to like be in development of teachers. I get to lead trainings. I get to coordinate programs. I get to work with teachers on multiple capacities. And then I started leading my own 200-hour trainings as Jenny started stepping away. And from after I led a couple 200-hour trainings, Jenny then created the 300-hour, and the 300-hour is where I really like just fell in love. There was just something about the next level of 300-hour conversation that was happening, and also the way we structure our 300-hour that just really, really, really deeply inspired me. So I kind of let go of leading the 200-hour and stepped into leading the 300-hour. I still get to teach a lot in the 200-hour, which I love, but the 300-hour is really where I spend the majority of my time. So now I do 300-hour, I do workshop coordination, program coordination, and master teacher, all for Raw.
Wow, that's a lot of roles you have because I know you still also teach group classes as well.
Yep, I still group classes. I still have do private classes. I'm also a bookkeeper, so like yoga teaching actually is not my only gig. I also have a couple bookkeeping clients, and I also do HR, payroll, and membership services management for other studios. So I have a lot of roles and a lot of things that I keep on my plate, but that brings me the most joy. I love it.
Wow, so many different roles and skill sets that you have. So I guess I'm curious, what does your typical week of being full-time yoga teacher, but having all this other side gigs and streams of income, what does it look like? And if you, yeah, what does your typical week look like?
Yeah, I teach about 5 to 10 classes a week, and that's what I found is really my sweet spot. I love being able to teach a little bit more when I feel inspired or maybe need a little extra income, and then teach a little bit less when I may be a little tired or need to focus on other things. I really value that flexibility. So I teach about 5 to 10 classes a week. I lead the 300-hour one night a week. I spend about 10 hours, give or take, a week on workshops for Raw. Our work, ever since I took over workshops, they've been really busy and really thriving. And it just brings me so much joy to get to offer opportunities to other teachers to hopefully add more to their teaching, add more to their ability to create an income, further their careers. So I spend about 10 hours a week doing that. And then I get to spend about 10, 15 hours a week working with the back end of the 300 hour, which is teacher relationships, my own personal study. I'm always in some type of training, kind of going back to that idea of always being a student. I am always in some type of training. Right now I'm doing Ma Yoga's prenatal training, and then I start another somatic training next year. And so that takes up several hours a week. And then I spend about 10 to 15 hours a week, depending on the week, doing all the bookkeeping, payroll, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it'll hit 20 hours a week, especially as we get towards the end of the year or get towards tax season. That takes up a little more time. So yes, if you add it up, I work about a 60-hour work week. That's my average work week.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot. And
Yeah.
with the work that you do for raw yoga, like 300 hour or managing workshop, those hours, is it like hourly paid that you have to like give them how many hours you worked, or is it kind of set salary and you're just expected to work certain number of hours on different projects?
Yeah, I clock in and out on an hourly basis for the for raw on the management side. And I usually work on average about 20, 25 hours a week on like the clocking in and out side, but I have the capacity to work more if like some big project is happening or I'm really working on something.
Mhm. And I guess I'm curious of your thought on, because you did experience teaching many, many classes a week when you were still newer a teacher, and then now you have more roles and tasks, managing, creating programs, and kind of get to do different things. You have different hats you wear in the yoga teaching world or a role. Do you like these balances of different things? Do you miss certain one more than other, or do you wish you had more, I guess, role in certain area of this teaching blend that you have, or does it feel like this is a perfect ratio of everything?
The only thing I would do more of is if every night of the week I could teach a teacher training, I would. Sitting in circle with souls that want to learn more about the path of yoga and about themselves is the greatest privilege and joy of my life. And I maybe get to do it 1 to 2 times a week. And if I could do it more, I would. Hence the fact in the new year, I'll actually be assisting a friend of mine. She owns a studio in Canyon Country, and I'll be leading the sutras in her 200 hour, as well as I believe Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, sequencing, and history of yoga. So I'll be doing a 200 hour with her. And then I'm also launching my own training, which is the 3 Jewels meditation training. It starts in March and runs until the end of the year next year. And that just really comes from this like deep desire in my heart to spend more time in circle with people that want to understand and learn more about yoga and more about themselves. It's my favorite.
So it seems like teacher training, leading a group and trainings for people who really want to go deeper is where your desires
That's
and
it.
passions are. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I'm thinking of all that you do, because it sounds like you do so many different things, if you are adding on more of those, being guest teachers and also starting your own training programs, are you planning to maybe slowly let go of other roles and other responsibilities you have? Because otherwise, I feel like you're going to just have, because you already work 60 hours a week, you know?
Yeah, I know it sounds like a lot, but we tend to think of a work week, me being Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So usually when I say that number, maybe you think of me waking up at like 6 a.m. and working until 8 p.m., right? And that's not at all true. Like I just got back from my friend's wedding in Cabo. In a week, I leave for New Zealand. In spring, I'm going to Japan. I have like deep, meaningful friendships. I'm in a very happy marriage. We spend a lot of time together. Um, so it sounds like a lot, but if you actually spread it out over 7 weeks or 7 days, that's what I love about, I guess we call it gig culture or, whatever you want to call it. I love that I can kind of like wake up, teach a class, come home, answer a couple emails, eat lunch with my husband, answer some more emails, teach a training. Like I do not week to week experience my life as unmanageable or stressful in any way. Now, I will sometimes let myself get to that point. Like I've taken on more and then I'll get to the end of a week and be like, oh, whoa, no, that was too much. Like I am suffering. And usually if I get to the end of one week and that's true, then it's like, okay, maybe I need to rearrange. But if I get to the end of like a second week and that's true, then I get to start asking myself like, okay, what's the trade-off going to be? Like something needs to be delegated, something needs to be moved around, something else needs to be looked at. So we'll kind of see as it goes. I'm leading the meditation training with two other amazing women, Shelby Nisham and Chris McClellan. They are very, very intelligent, very like deep and beautiful souls. They're also very responsible and on top of it and like kind of able to carry the training with me. So it's not like it's all going to fall on me and then it becomes this big burden for me. We all are, doing our part and like sharing together. And as they say, like many hands make light work. So far it has not been overwhelming. So far it's not felt like too much, but also we'll kind of see how I feel as we turn into next year. Next year, I'm also going to be leading a retreat, which I haven't led a retreat in since pre-pandemic. So I'll be leading a retreat in Montana in May. And that'll be more around Soma Psyche Soul, which is the somatic movement, mindfulness practices and grounding practices that I've been getting more into lately. So I'm sure about March of next year, I will feel very differently than I feel now. But for right now, I'm feeling good.
Yeah, well, I love to hear all the exciting things that's coming up, and it's all the things you love to do. And it seems like you have a great team and people you're working with, collaborating with. So sounds all exciting. So I have a question for you because you said that in the beginning when you started teaching a lot of classes as a new teacher, you had or you were going towards a burnout. And that's the conversation I have a lot with a lot of teachers I interview is a lot of us do kind of go through that beginning stage of teaching so much, saying yes to so many things and hitting the burnout or getting close to it. So do you have any boundaries that you put in place now with where you are at in your teaching and your whole career at working in the yoga world? Do you have certain boundary that helps you not get to the point of burnout, whether that's like, I don't work on this day and this day, or whatever it is, any kind of boundary work or even self-care work that you have that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, for me, the number one way that I avoid getting back into that burnout state, because yes, it happened in my early teaching career, but it has happened several times. Like, I just really wish we could all normalize as teachers or, as full-time anythings, as a full-time mother, as a full-time, like working full-time and also on your side hustle, like all of us, let's just normalize saying that balance is bullshit. Sorry, I don't know if we cuss on this podcast. Balance is not the goal. Balance day to day ain't a thing. Instead, we need to think about working at a sustainable pace, right? Yoga teaches us change at the pace of nature. We want to be in that sattvic space. So we don't want to be rajasic, which is like we're working too hard, too fast, too long. We don't want to be tamasic, in which we are not working at all, failing to engage, getting depressed, getting down. We want to find that sattvic place. And in my experience, that's knowing when you're there, knowing that when we're in that like wonderful space of sustainable work is only and fully and completely an internal knowing. So what it looks like for me is very different than what it looks like for other people. Because for me, ironically, it is actually by having more on my plate that I'm getting less burned out. So even when I was teaching less group classes, but leading the 200 hour, I hit a huge wall. And I was, I've almost stopped teaching several times actually through burnout, because what I've found for me is what it actually means is I'm getting bored. I get really bored. I get bored very easily. This is something I just now know about myself. And so for me, it's actually not like, oh, do less. For me, it's like, oh, I need to do something other than teaching so that I can keep myself engaged. I need to do something other than teaching so that I feel the full spectrum of who I am as a human being is being appreciated and being engaged in my day-to-day life. So I do have boundaries around teaching. Like I said, I keep a 5 to 10 classes per week is like really a hard stop. 5 is like, I think I have 7 on my permanent schedule. So maybe I'll pick up 1 or 2 in a week, but I really don't force myself to. But other than that, what boundaries actually look like for me is making sure that in a week I see my friends, in a week I spend quality time with my husband, and also in a week I'm doing something other than teaching, sequencing, and thinking and talking about yoga.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, it's going to look different for every single person,
Mhm.
and we shouldn't strive for this. This is the way that we have to do it. This is the boundary that everybody have to have, because everybody's so different, what they can handle, what the capacity is. And also, like you said, you do well with having multiple things, different roles.
Mhm.
And another question I had that came to me, so listeners listening, I feel like me included, are probably thinking like, wow, Madison does so many amazing things, like teaching this training and leading that and leading this and also teaching classes. And maybe some listeners who feel like they're not there yet. Maybe they're a newer teacher. They've been teaching for maybe a couple years and look up to you and be like, wow, that's what I want. What kind of advice would you give to teachers listening and they're looking at you and be like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that.
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice is that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. So if you want to lead a yoga retreat and you launch some big yoga retreat and you like put it out there and do your best and no one signs up, and so then you don't lead it and you try again next year, well, great. Congratulations. You tried to lead a yoga retreat. That is like one huge step closer than sitting back and saying like, "Oh, I wish I could lead a retreat." And then just thinking about it all the time. You make more progress trying, having it not work out this time, rearranging and trying again than you do sitting back and telling yourself that one day you will, if only and when. I also really advise to partner with people. So, like my first 2 yoga retreats, I taught with teachers that had been teaching longer than I had, that had more experience and more of a following than I did, because I knew that that would probably fill my yoga retreat. Right. So, same thing with trainings. Like, I did not launch my own training until I'd been teaching for 15 years. I've been leading trainings with Raw for over a decade now. So, finding either studios or people or communities that you can be involved with, that you can be like, hey, here's what I want to do and here's what I have to offer. Would you like to do the other part of it? Would you like to, bring in the other side of that? Will only help you more. And also, even if you do it yourself, then do it yourself and figure it out. Like, when I think of some of the first asana classes that I taught as a yoga teacher, I want to cringe at how now awful and unsafe and ridiculous they were. And also, you know what? Students left that class being like, wow, can't wait to come back to her class next week. So, like, do I look back at my first yoga retreat and go like, ooh, yeah, about a couple things I do. A couple things I was like, what was I thinking? But students from that retreat came to my next yoga retreat and still take my yoga classes. So I say go for it. Live the life that you imagine, and like press forward, take chances. The world belongs to the brave.
I love that. Thank you. Such a great
Mhm.
advice. And I just have a couple more questions for you. What do you love the most about being a full-time yoga teacher, or just being somebody like you who work in the yoga world? You have so many different roles. And what do you find it most challenging?
Yeah, I think this would really specifically, I've been almost exclusively in the raw community for over a decade now. So I will say that I'm in a bit of a bubble. And the reason that I love staying in that bubble is that overall, everyone that I meet on a day-to-day basis, be it student, fellow teacher, front desk person, manager, owner, anyone that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, overwhelmingly are positive, kind, generous people. Like out in the world, it can get real rough. And it never ceases to amaze me when people are negative and tear you down and yell and cut you off. Like, so much of that exists in the world. And at Raw, overwhelmingly, everyone that I meet, it just wants to be kind and wants to do the best they can and wants to, like, even if there's a misunderstanding, wants to have a conversation about it, get to the other side of it, work through it, maintain harmony. And that's so important to me because I naturally tear myself down and pick myself apart. And so being in an environment where I'm given the benefit of the doubt and I'm surrounded by people that are kind, is really, really beautiful and very, very important to me. I would say the thing I'm challenged most about is that I am definitely an introvert. And there are times in this job and in this career path that if I wanted to have a limiting belief, what that limiting belief would be is that this job does not reward introverts. And being an introvert in this job is very challenging because the expectation is that I am extroverted. The expectation is that I spend more time talking, more time communicating, more time in relationship, more in order to, create relationship and therefore also create, success. And it's very hard for me. And I sometimes wish that I did a job where I didn't have to talk to anyone in a day. And I also sometimes wish, and sometimes literally will say to my students, like, I really hope that you all know that I love you and that I adore you and I hold you close to my heart. Just because I'm not the person that, like, picks up the phone and calls you, texts you, asks you out to coffee. But, like, just because I'm not that person doesn't mean you do not have a space in my life, in my heart, in my, world. And so I struggle with that a lot, of trying to find a balance of being authentic to who I am, which is a little more private, a little more quiet, and also trying to be sure that my students feel loved and connected to me because I feel loved and connected to them.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Definitely, I feel you because I'm definitely an introvert, and a lot of yoga teaching is extrovertedness. Or you don't have to be
Mhm.
super extrovert, but you do have to get in front of a group of people and have the energy to be able to do that and hold space. So yeah, definitely. I more and more longer I've been teaching, I just know I need alone time to kind of recharge myself after teaching for a long period of time, long hours or long days. I just need some time to just like be alone, do my little thing and not really interact with other people. And that's kind of how I learned that
Mhm.
about myself, that I need to recharge. So, and then, I feel like a lot of yoga teachers are introvert, which is so interesting. Not all, but a lot of people are. So I think it's interesting that, a lot of us are introvert, but we have a job where we have to come in front of people and become a facilitator of people who hold space. And I think it works out. It works out. I think it gave me, when I was teaching teacher training in Peru, because I'm an introvert and because I tend to be more quieter in the big group setting, if I'm not leading a training, if I'm not the one leading that group, it really made me pay more attention to the quieter students in the group and really thought about how can I
Mhm.
make them also feel heard and being part of the group. And I think there's a strength and benefit to yoga teachers being introvert because we can actually notice and make sure everybody, no matter whether students are extrovert or introvert, they can feel seen and being part of the group.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. Last question. What does success mean to you as a full-time yoga teacher?
Hmm. I always fall back on my mission statement, which, in my 300-hour program, I walk people through writing a mission statement. Whenever I mentor anyone, I walk people through writing a mission statement. If we do not know where it is we are trying to go, then we will never know how to get there or if we have gotten there. Success and happiness are relative. And if we are defining it by how other people think or feel about us, then we are chasing the horizon, which is an imaginary line that recedes as we approach it. We will never get there. So we need to decide what that means for us. And for me, the way I've done that is I've created a mission statement. And my mission statement is to awaken people to their spark of the infinite within. So that means that I must always be doing that, right? Because again, I can't control other people. So I'm awakening myself to the spark of the infinite within. And when I feel that, whenever I lead a training or a class or an interaction or a conversation, if I feel my infinite, my Purusha, my spark of the infinite within light up, if I feel that beautiful sattvic feeling, then I know that I am successful. And that can look very different depending on the situation, right? Depending on the class, depending on the time, the day, what is needed. So awakening people to their spark of the infinite within is how I know that I'm successful.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that and your mission statement. I think that's so great that you also encourage other teachers and people you mentor to write their mission statement. So thank you so much, Madison, for your time. This has been such a great conversation, and I feel like I got to know you more, and I'm just so inspired by a lot that you shared today. Please tell the listeners how they can find you, how they can reach you, if they have any upcoming events or trainings, retreat, anything coming up that you want to share with the listeners. Please share it with them now, and I'll make sure I'll link all of that on the show notes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I am pretty active on Instagram, millennial. So my Instagram handle is at Ms. Madison, MIZZMADISON. I post about everything that I do on there. I am on there a lot. It's a great way to get in touch with me. My personal email is msmadison@gmail.com. And those are both probably the best ways to reach me. Some things that I have going on in the new year is I am leading a 2 workshop and 1 retreat series at Ra. So it'll be Soma, Psyche, and Soul. Soma and Psyche will be workshops at the Costa Mesa location, and then Soul will be the retreat in Montana. You can find all of that on the Ra Yoga website, on the Ra Yoga Instagram. I'm leading my 3 Jewels meditation training, and that will be starting in March and going until December. You can find information on that on my Instagram or by reaching out to me. And yeah, I lead the 300-hour teacher training at Ra. That is happening all the time. So we do not have like a launch day and an end day. You jump in whenever you feel inspired. You start taking courses and you build as you go. You can take the 300-hour, whether you are a 200-hour student that wants to do their 300-hour, a 200-hour student that wants to do continuing education, or just a human that feels very inspired to learn more about yoga and about themselves. All of those scenarios are welcome. You can find information about the 300-hour at raw.rawyoga.com, rawu.rawyoga.com. That's where all of the courses are posted. And I'm teaching my favorite course in January, which is now the teaching of yoga. It is chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras. That starts January 8th and runs through January. So I would love to have anyone who feels called to talk more about the sutras join me in January.
Thank you so much, Madison. I really love all that you have coming up and all the trainings that you're teaching. And like I said, a lot of people I interviewed and I speak to all talk very highly of you. So I'm so excited that I got to finally have this interview and I can share this with the listeners. So thank you so much for your time. And
Thank you.
Yes, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, I'll see you very soon. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Bye.
That is it for today. I hope you really enjoyed the conversation I had with Madison. I think it was very inspiring, and I admire her energy and power and passion that she has for yoga, and especially teaching teachers and trainings in the yoga world. She has made tremendous impact on so many yoga teachers in Southern California. So it was so lovely to hear her journey of how she got to where she is now, and so much that she does for her community and so much exciting stuff coming up for her. It was really nice to have this conversation with her. So I hope you really enjoyed it. Her contact information will be in the show notes, so you can find out. You can go reach out to her if you like. And before we say goodbye, I do want to say, if you like this podcast, if you like this episode, please share this episode or podcast with your friends, family, co-workers, your fellow yoga teachers, or you can always like, subscribe, star, or rate, or leave me a review on this podcast from wherever you listen to this podcast from. That is something so simple, and it's going to help me tremendously. So thank you for listening as always. If you'd like to reach out to me, my Instagram is @Reika Yoga. My website is www.reikayoga.com. All the links to this will be on the show notes, so you can find me easily. And don't forget about the upcoming workshop on March 1st with Ali, how to refine your handstand and how to be a better handstand teacher. So that workshop is coming up in March 1st. Information to that workshop will also be on the show notes. So that is it from me today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and talk to you next week. Bye.